See, that's the main thing. If you can control the food, you can control the population. Who was that? Kissinger had been all over that. Kissinger was over that like a duck on a June bug, all over that. Control the food, control the populace. Energy, that's one thing. If you're too weak and you're laying on the floor, malnourished, I don't care if I put a brick of gold next to you. It's worthless, meaningless. If you can't even pick it up because you're so malnourished, I mean, that thing is worthless to you. Same with free electricity, free gasoline in your car. If you're too malnourished to drive your car, it's meaningless.
Okay, I'm your host, James White. This is Northwest Liberty News. We have a returning guest, someone I consider a good friend. We used to broadcast together. He's been on top of most everything you see going on right now that you see in the day-to-day news. He's been talking about for years. I'm delighted to have David Devine on the broadcast. He's one of the smartest cats I know, especially when it comes to weather patterns, food shortages, and things that he's been talking about. I mean, we've both been talking about for a long time. He has Adapt 2030 YouTube channel. I know now he's got, I think, over 100,000 subscribers on his channel. We're delighted for his success, and he puts out regular reports. He's really on top of everything that we're about to talk about today. David Devine, thanks so much for joining us here on Northwest Liberty News.
Always a pleasure, and thanks you for having me back so I can express part of my opinions today on how I see this as a grab for the global food supply. What you're seeing in front of you is nothing but a distraction to grab the global food supply before we go into less production from this year forward due to 400-year cycles in the sun, or perhaps this time a 2,000-year cycle in the sun.
No, David, we've been talking about this. You've certainly longer than I, but we've had broadcasts after this. I've done numerous broadcasts. I think we had John. Man, boy, I can't remember. I hope John's doing better. He's the
John Casey. John Casey. I tried to reach out to him today, as a matter of fact.
Right, Upheaval, I think, was the book that he has. I was just looking at it earlier today, as a matter of fact. These are things, as we talked about before. This isn't a conspiracy. This isn't something that is some woo-woo type space crazy thing. This is a cyclical thing that's happened about every 400 years. Now, I wasn't aware of the 2000 one. I know we've been talking about the 400-year cycle repeatedly, but this 2,000 years, have you done some deeper research since recently? Have you done some deeper research about that? And tell us about the 2,000-year cycle, David.
Well, it could possibly even be a 3,600-year cycle, because both of these larger, more heavier, powerful cycles incorporate the 400-year cycle. If you take a look at 5 400-year cycles, that's 2,000 years, and 9 of the 400-year cycles is 3,600 years. So I'm basing my premise on the record grain production across all of Northern Africa, as well as the locust outbreaks and I should say swarms and whatnot, the largest in more than 100 years now, that seem to be signaling where the new grow zones are emerging. When we look at Iran, all-time record rains, and this goes back past the Silk Road trader days. So you have to go pre-1,500 years ago to find anything in the accounts that might even equal what we're seeing today with the record rainfall. But even back then, when the Silk Road had branched south before it terminated in Istanbul, they never talked about these types of rains ever. So you have to really wonder what kind of iteration and what type of more heavier, powerful cycle we're on, because there seems to be a lot of interest in North Africa, combining the underwater resources in Libya to irrigate using canals, as well as the increasing above ground rainfall to turn North Africa into the world's largest grow zone, as areas like North America, here in Canada, United States, parts of Europe, and China go offline. Now, China's been out there for a while with its projects, knowing the cycles, probably better than anybody, except for maybe what we stole from the indigenous and more ancient cultures as the planet was pillaged for 500 years. Now, there's still a lot of information in that, in codices, texts, etc. But going back and following the cycles based on trade and the trading routes, the sea route, the Southern Silk Road, and the regular Silk Road that we know, from the deserts out in Xinjiang all the way over to Istanbul, they mapped it out for 4,000 years. So Chinese know the cycles well. We obviously understand the cycles, and it all hinges on North Africa. Whoever controls that area to grow food is going to control the new century. Maybe that's a mouthful, but that's exactly where I'm at in my
Well,
research.
I mean, if these things do come to fruition, David, and I don't see any reason why historically they should not. We're talking about, there's I'm up here in, northwest Montana. I'm not so sure, from what I'm understanding, depending upon who you talk to, we could have anywhere from 6 week to 2 week growing season, which of course is probably not even worth trying to grow. I mean, if you had, I think it was described to me basically this way, that you can probably, yeah, sure, you can still live in Montana, probably, but it's going to be so expensive because nothing's going to be able to be grown there. Everything's going to have to be trucked in. It's almost be like living on an island somewhere off of coast of Alaska or something. Everything has to be flown in, driven in, or other ways get in. So everything's going to be moving south. Do you see that, David? People are going to be moving south down to warmer areas eventually as we get going into this cycle.
I would agree, unless we do use different tech and you start to think about ways to overcome the difficulties that you see in your local area, whether that be submerged greenhouses or indoor vertical agriculture or something like this. There's a lot of solutions that are going to come out during this time because people aren't going to want to move. Or like we see now, you simply can't. And what's funny about this whole CV that's happening at the moment, this was predicted in the grand solar minimum models where governments across the planet would work in unison to lock down the planet so people couldn't go to those areas further south that you just referenced. And this was going to occur about 1 year out before the food insecurity would be enough that would alert almost everybody on the planet that we have a problem. Now, it wouldn't come down to, a full global famine or anything within that 1 year period, but there would be so much understanding, so much awakening that people would really start to question everything. Why weren't we warned? Why didn't governments give us this last 20 years to at least try to get ready to get different systems in place to, swap over for systems that are no longer working at optimum efficiency? And a lot of questions would be asked about the answers in the organizations, the institutions, the experts, quote unquote. And I don't know, they were to lock everybody down. And this was all supposed to happen about a year out before the first shocks and the global awareness was coming about our food situation. And guess what? We're right here, right now. So we thought it was coming in 2023. Most everybody I talked with, and some of the same people. So it seemed to have occurred about maybe 2.5 years earlier than anticipated. So this almost gives credence to the heavier, more powerful cycle. If it was a 400-year cycle, which we had talked about 2023 being the first date, if it was a once in a 2000 or once in a 3600-year cycle, it would definitely occur earlier with a heavier intensity. So this is just kind of a piece of anecdotal evidence. Now, is it provable? Unknown at the moment, but it seems that something's happening faster on the timelines than originally anticipated. Now, I don't know if you agree with that because we talked about some of the same timelines long ago.
No, I thought, I was thinking it was going to be we had a little bit more time as well.
So did I.
But I didn't know what this, I didn't know about this conference that they had here until recently, of course, until all that came out, and they had this conference with Gates and all these other people about this. This seems to be a plan of theirs to do this ahead of, years in advance. Of course, these people plan years in advance. We think like 2 or 3 weeks out, the general population,
Where's my groceries?
Yeah, exactly. And we've been sort of really numbed down to only thinking a few days ahead. These people think decades ahead, right? And they got a plan. But I'm going to bring up a couple of things here on this, David, and I want you to talk about this. I mean, this is what we're talking about here, folks. This is not fear mongering or conspiracy theory, anything. This is
fact.
This fact.
Sky's blue.
Let's look here.
Argue and say, well, you're just telling me the sky's blue because you're trying to stir up trouble. No, sky's blue.
No, true.
Water's H2O, and we'll just keep going from there. Okay, fact. Yeah, meatpacking plants were up. Well, you're hitting the nail on the head.
You can see these, right? You can see these articles.
I can. I'm looking at it right here.
Very good. So these are all fairly recent, right here. This is the April 23rd, 24th. Union warns of food shortages as more meatpacking workers get COVID-19. America's food supply depends on these workers. They feed Americans. This is, of course, not good. And we got the next one over here. This is today. Tyson Food
again.
Chairman warns the food supply chain is breaking. In recent weeks, the poultry producer has temporarily suspended operations at plants across the country. Next
Now
one
you need to
here.
add Hormel and also Smithfield into that as well. So we got these three meatpacking giants in the United States: Tyson, Smithfield, and Hormel, all with the same exact problem. There's more than 250 facilities closed at the moment. And I was looking on the USDA reports today to see how many feeder hogs are in the system, how many cattle, how many beef cattle. And it's 25% less and a third less for the beef cattle than just last year. There's been significant drops in terms of animal husbandry across the US, and they just culled what, 30 million chickens here in the last week, all the way from the Northeast all the way down to Georgia.
Oh yeah, man.
Where's the
No.
meat going to come from? Eggs, meat, dairy. They're pouring out the milk. This is a sickening thing here. They couldn't freeze dry the milk or dehydrate it or dry it and put it in bags. They had to waste all that milk. It's just sickening. Americans are going hungry, not having milk shortage, and they're pouring out milk in certain parts of the country. It's so bizarro world at the moment. I'm kind of perplexed, other than they're creating a problem so then they can put a solution in.
Yeah,
Hegelian dialect almost,
yeah,
problem,
yeah,
reaction,
yeah. It's
solution.
always a damn. Yeah, that's their game. That's their game plan. There's a couple more. Let's look at this.
Yeah, sorry to
U.S.
interrupt you. Go
No,
ahead.
you're good. U.S. stores and supermarkets might see shortages for the next year and a half. Supply chain experts say. That's from Business Insider.
Predictive programming, get ready, grow your own.
Just saying. Right on. Yep. Supermarket guru warns of food shortages in the near future.
Predictive programming,
Phil
grow your
Lumpert
own.
is supermarket guru. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, it does say, I believe, in one of these where people are starting to grow their own food more. And this is, now, isn't it interesting? Maybe not interesting, but isn't it telling that in Michigan, they tried to block seeds? Seeds. You can't buy seeds to grow stuff. I mean, come on, David. What are we, imbeciles? You can't tell that what that is they want to control. They don't want people to be self-sufficient. They want.
But it does seem to be control of the food supply, because Celeste told me, and I think she's living up in Montana still, that they're forbidding and stopping all farmers markets this year from operating in Montana. Don't know if you've heard anything about that yet, but she had told me that all farmers markets are suspended for this year. So without the farmers markets, again, you're being directed right back into the food, conglomerate chain there. There's no option for you. And after I heard that, and I was reading a little more into it, talking with a friend of mine, I was like, it might be a crime to trade food in the future, just like you're alluding to there, where it would be an illegal activity for you to be able to trade produce because it didn't go through some check or whatnot. Or really, what are you in for? I'm in for 5 years. What'd you do? Oh, I was trading tomatoes at the farmer's market. It's going to come down to something ridiculous like this. And you might laugh now and you might go, you guys, but wait until see, that's the main thing. If you can control the food, you can control the population. Who was that? Kissinger had been all over that. Kissinger was over that like a duck on a June bug, all over that. Control the food, control the populace. Energy, that's one thing. If you're too weak and you're laying on the floor, malnourished, I don't care if I put a brick of gold next to you. It's worthless, meaningless. If you can't even pick it up because you're so malnourished, I mean, that thing is worthless to you. Same with free electricity, free gasoline in your car. If you're too malnourished to drive your car, it's meaningless. Control the food, control the population.
And you really hit the nail on the head. What it's all about is the big C word. It's about control. It's all always about control. And it's easier to control large groups of people than it is to control a few individuals. And you saw what happens with this herd mentality just with the toilet paper thing. Was not even a stomach flu. And so that got put out there, like you talked about. Somebody put out photos or images of people hoarding toilet paper, and then it just kind of went across the country, and everybody's hoarding toilet paper, and you couldn't even get toilet paper like in the local grocery store. And like I said, it's not even a stomach virus. So we're really kind of captured, David. We're really captured in a lot of ways, I think, sadly. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that was a psychological profiling done because, like, let's just use Sam's or Costco. They know everybody's buying habits or, everything that's there because you have your card. They know who you were. Because some stores you can still go in and pay cash and they don't really know who you are unless you're using a points reward card. My own personal thing, when I was in Sam's, everybody had carts full of toilet paper. I had an entire cart full of food with zero toilet paper, and they were probably looking at me like, "Who's this idiot with no toilet paper in his cart?" And I'm looking at them going, "Thanks for not buying all the food. You guys keep buying the toilet paper." But imagine the psychological profiling you could get from that to see the herd mentality, who was driven to buy the paper, who was driven to buy extremes amounts of paper, who, like myself, didn't buy it at that time. And you get a whole bunch of demographic information in terms of how the human's operating based on the stimulus input. So this whole toilet paper thing, I think, was just a psychological profile to see, what the reaction would be of a certain number and demographics of people, and then they're harvesting that information to see when they go around 2.0 in November, what's going to happen. Now that might be, I don't know, too far fetched, but I don't know if you agree with that.
Oh, it's you bring up a good point. And now here's what I'm curious to know is typically typically we've had these famine issues in like third world countries, right? We've seen the commercials on TV with
Sally
the
Struthers.
children, right? Swollen stomachs, and it's usually probably in sub-Saharan Africa, maybe, or something with it's just it's you know what I'm talking about. That's always been considered sort of a third world thing, right? Do you think that we are? I mean, and then of course you don't have a crystal ball, but this could turn in. We could see that kind of famine in certain parts of this country if people don't start growing gardens. That's what I'm going to do. I want to talk about a little bit later on. We're going to talk about growing a garden and how to get started, and because that's a lot of things people, the fear thing. People are afraid to even try sometimes. And
Oh, super easy to do.
right, it's just it's soil and seeds and like water and sunlight. I mean, you got
And your love with some fertilizer
right on, and a deer fence where I live. You have
and
to
a
have
rabbit fence and safe traps to try to get the raccoons, the possums, the squirrels that are going to nibble everything. The slug repellent with sand and a few others too. By the way, it's not going to be like, hey, throw a seed and you got like a bountiful
right,
garden. You got to take care of it.
right. But my point being is, it's doable. It's doable. The ground will yield this for you. So are we seeing without some real education and some real action here, David, by people, as far as like learning how to can, learning how to grow, maybe getting a chicken or two, we could see a real in certain pockets, especially these large urban areas. This is when you get caught in a large urban area without really any food. Escape from New York was the movie I think that came out a few years back, and that's not an impossible situation if people go hungry.
Those of you listening, James and I, we didn't talk about what our content was be, especially down to this level. But I have this book right here. Let me bring it down to the frame.
Nice. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
There
because
you
I'm
go.
already starting. And this is the fermentation can where you only have to do 10 minutes. You don't have to put it under pressure and, have that scary monster that might blow up and scare the kids. This is just, put it in the hot water for 10 minutes. And it's going to be generally like pickles and different kind of acidic foods, more vegetables. And you can make jams and this type of thing and preserve it and ferment it, keep it, can it. You need jars, you need lids for this. I think a lot of people have jars. You can get a lot of used jars from spaghetti sauce. You can reuse a lot of different jars, but it's the lids are what's going to be the thing. So if I was in a store and I had a chance to choose A, B, C, or D, would I buy the jar, the lid, or the ring? I would definitely go for the lid every single time because you can always find jars that can be reused, but it's very difficult to find the lids. If you run out of the lids, you just run out of everything. But anyway, you're going to have to learn how to, think like your grandma is the way we're going to have to go. And I think the famine in the United States might not be as dramatic, but here's the saddest thing. Like we're spending all this money bankrupting the economy to reset a system to bring in crypto and a new gold-backed currency and a whole new, Bank for International Settlements with IMF, International Monetary Fund, reset coin here. When 8,000, this is just in Africa and like you say in the Middle East, just in Africa and the Middle East, 8,000 children starve to death every day, a day, every day. And here we are quibbling about 23 people dying over here, a couple hundred die over there. Well, the fastest way to stop all the death on the planet is to actually get the kids food that are in some of these impoverished nations you talk about. And I've heard it as high as globally, including all the continents, 12 million children starve to death every year. 12 million. That is sickening. When I started to look at these numbers, I never really looked at the demographics of death that much before. But after people kept sending me an enormous amount of things, like they'd rack up all these things from cancer to auto accidents to starvation. And this little COVID thing is so far down on the chart that it's just like one pencil mark in comparison to, the 12 million deaths from food every year. And then way down at the bottom, we have like 40,000 scratch on that 12 million line. It's just really a tiny little mark in that whole thing. And we stopped the entire global economy. So it's got to be something way more grandiose than just trying to protect you. Because, these large corporations and governments don't care about you. They don't want to protect you. They could care less about you. You're just a cog in the machine. That's why they give you a social security number, because you're nothing more than a number in the Borg. The hive mind Borg, you're a number. That's all they care about. How much tax money you're bringing in, what kind of work you can put toward the greater machine, and that's it. And now suddenly they're so caring about your health that they want to lock down the entire planet's economy. Nope, it's a reset. And this grand solar minimum would reset it anyway. So famine here, I doubt it. We have a lot of resources. Like for America, there's only 5 countries in the world. There's another factoid that you might like. There's only 5 countries in the world that produce enough food for their entire country, plus they can export enough to feed 10 more countries. We're one of them. So when you look at that, the amount of available grow food, even if you just kind of wild forage through the forest, you could still find food. In the cities is a different animal. But if you start getting out in the countryside and the demographics spilled out of the city and started to fill up all the croplands, the Midwest, and all these other places, and it spread out more evenly than all these densely packed cities, I think that people will grow their own food and there wouldn't be such a thing, especially if you learn how to raise chickens. That's easy. You had a pond, you had fish, frogs, turtles, you know, get some birds, rabbits.
Hesky Cider Farm. All right, let me
I
take a
do
quick.
have,
Let me take a quick.
actually.
This isn't anything that needs to be a disaster in your life, because there's always like opportunities when these type of things happen. If Trump ends the Fed and basically goes back to a Treasury issued dollar, which is well within the Constitution to do you think this could destroy their one world currency plan, or do you think there's no stopping them at this point?
Not a chance. Even if mucus and the Fed were out of the way, everything else would just cave in on it. The ECB still there, Japanese central bank still there, IMF still there. I mean, there's a million other players that would fill the vacuum in a second.
Okay, I'm your host, James White. This is Northwest Liberty News. We have a returning guest, someone I consider a good friend. We used to broadcast together. He's been on top of most everything you see going on right now, that you see in the day-to-day news. He's been talking about for years. I'm delighted to have David Devine on the broadcast. He's one of the smartest cats I know, especially when it comes to weather patterns, food shortages, and things that he's been talking about. I mean, we've both been talking about for a long time. He has Adapt 2030 YouTube channel. I know now he's got, I think, over 100,000 subscribers on his channel. We're delighted for his success, and he puts out regular reports. David Devine, thanks so much for joining us here on Northwest Liberty News. Oilseedcrops.org. And go ahead, David, why don't you, before we go on to the next one here, is that a cheese grater?
That is a grow light. See, this is the most quirky thing. You've talked about two things that I just have laying around that I'm working with as we speak. I'm going to be setting up this as a grow tray here to do microgreens just on a regular rack. And this is a new grow light that's all one spectrum LED. I'm not selling this. I'm actually using it because I believe in it. So let me plug it in and take a look at the coloration on this thing.
There we go. Wow, look at that. Nice. You could probably go quite a bit under that, David.
Yeah, and it radiates out. It's a full foot, so it radiates out about 6 feet down because it's at 120 degree for every single one of the small lumens in there. And these are all one spectrum LED. And these are the kind of grow lights that I'm using. So when you talk about solutions as such, that if I'm at this level here where I got books about canning laying around in my front room that I can literally just go grab it in 2 seconds, I got a LED grow light that I'm working with for microgreens on a tray. What are you doing this week while you're home? The reason, when we finish with this, the reason I was out and coming back, we bought a bunch of wood today to do raised grow beds. So,
right.
A majority of my day today has been just focused around agriculture, grow beds with the wood, vertical ag, taking a look at the canning book, and going out and planting seeds for the sunset tonight. Because, the moon right now is at its low phase. So right now it's spring and it's new moon. So if you plant now, you get some really good harvests as we're coming in. It's like the double goodness right now, new moon and the beginning of the month here without with the last frost for us at least. So it's going to be the great time to go. So what have you been doing? If I can do these things, you can do it too. And these are the solutions that we're all going to need to move to self-sufficiency. And if you're able to overproduce, then be able to buy, sell, or trade with others who aren't producing, that can give you something back in value as well. Because we're all not going to be able to grow food, but we all have skills and talents that you could then make something. Leathercraft, metal crafting. I mean, there's a million things that other people do that I don't have the time to. I don't have the time to cook cakes and breads. How about if I trade you vegetables for bread that you cooked?
No, right
I'll
on.
even
Yeah.
grow you the wheat or the buckwheat or the millet or the sorghum.
Well, I was just gonna, and that's what I was gonna say to you. We're gonna have to go back to some old school skills, like the canning. Now, I'm really intrigued by this book that you held up, where you can basically can in 10 minutes, and you don't have to do the boil. Because I think that's what you put the cans in. You got to boil them in the water, and then you do the vacuum thing. You're saying that you don't have to do all that with this book that you have there, right?
No, this is just for vegetables, and you do get the vacuum seal setting, but it's not like the high heat and high pressure that you would need for meat and that sort of
Right
thing.
on.
Like to do this very short amount of time for 10 minutes to do vegetables, very easy. But this is the brine bath kind of thing. You can make sauerkrauts and different kind of um, just acidic brine baths, basically pour overs. But if you're going to talk about canning meat, that you want to get that seal at 40 minutes under pressure cooking, that's an entirely different skill set to put
Right on.
these together. Although they require lids, they require the jars and everything else between the rings. It's all the same, but it's just the length of time and the thing that you're putting in the jar. Vegetables versus meat, it's a completely different thing.
I know you don't get any sponsorship for this, but people in the chat room are asking if you can hold up the book and give the name of the person on
Yeah,
that
no, I
book.
don't. This is absolutely free information. I encourage everybody and you should be doing the same. If you know something that can improve people's lives, you should be giving away for free. I mean, there's a point to charge for things, and if you're doing consulting and this sort of stuff.
So it's
But when it
called
comes down to these simple things, like this is a book I bought off of Amazon
Can It and
because I'm
Ferment It.
really interested in the canning aspect of it, right?
Is that
So,
so Shebane? Is that Shebane something? Shebane at the bottom?
Stephanie
Oh,
Turow is
sorry,
her name.
it's hard to see. Stephanie.
Thurow. Now, the reason I like it is because I have these 75 recipes in here and the color photos, and it shows you step by step how to do it. So I went through an enormous amount of books looking for this type of thing. Like, I was looking at one of these like pickled fennel because I want to get some fennel, and we can get that here and it grows pretty well. So again, it's all about regionally where you want to grow things and what grows well in your area. Like, but not everybody can get fennel. Some people are going to get pumpkin. It just depends on seasonal canning. Again, like I've been working with dehydrating too, cutting apples, dehydrating some apples. Although we had some good luck. I even opened a can of green beans and dehydrated those. They turned into like these things that were about the size of spaghetti. And I just been experimenting with a lot of stuff just to see what happens when you dehydrate or when making dried apples, uh, dried gooseberries, dried some mushrooms. We had a whole bunch of thyme and out there. We cut it up, dried it in there too, made powder out of it, put it in a coffee grinder and made powder. So fennel, thyme. What else do we have down? Sage. There's like these different types of plants that you can do yourself. Put them in dry them out, spin them up, turn them into a powder. There's an enormous amount of things you can do, but we're gonna have to start thinking more pioneering a lifestyle doing it. So what can you grow easy? What can you can easy? What can you preserve? So the only thing I tell you from personal experience, what I do need are the oxygen packs, which I don't have any of, which I need oxygen packs because when you put them in, I'm already finding some caking happening on the time that we spun out. We put it in the oven, dried it at like 150 for an hour. We just waited. We just felt it until it was dry. There was no specific time. After it was dry, we removed the stems and put it into a coffee grinder and turned it into a powder. But now that powder seems to be caking. But if there was an oxygen pack inside, I think it would
Right.
resolve that problem. So I want to know what they were doing in 1800s when they didn't have O2 packs. What did they do?
Yeah, good question. Well, there's a I don't know. I wish I knew. There is there's changes going on everywhere, David, as we know, and I think one of the changes that we're going to see is probably in the financial system. I don't know which way it's going to go. I know they've been floating, a digital currency. I believe in one of the bills that Nancy Pelosi tried to hold up for the relief fund. I think in one of those bills she had a digital currency. I forget the name of the. Is it Ripple? What's the name of the one that was?
Yeah, you must have watched my video from yesterday, didn't you? Yeah, Ripple. It was XRP,
Oh,
and it's a central
XRP.
bank digital currency, SBDC, and they're going to be running on distributed ledger technology using R3 and Ripple for distributed ledger. They're not going to go anything blockchain. It's going to be an independent protocol.
No, actually, I didn't have a chance to watch your video, David. I
Oh,
don't
well,
have a
that's
chance to
exactly
listen.
what it was about, was this whole thing inside the second stimulus bill. They've reintroduced it. And now on the third stimulus bill, which will come up, be forthcoming, they're actually going to try to put it through because they were looking at what the adoption and thought idea moving forward with this. Now, the digital dollar project is where you're going to want to look. And what's most interesting, the digital dollar project is now uh, connecting over into this new push forward for the digital currency, and the Canadian company. Oh, I forget, it escapes my name, something net. They just come out with the announcement because they do distributed disruptive technologies, and they were saying that they were totally ready for this central bank distributed ledger digital dollar to come out, that they had the workings to connect with it. And then get this, the person who's leading this project on the that's called the dollar project is the former director of the CFTC, Futures and Exchange Trade Commission. Now, they were the ones who stopped in 2017 most ICOs from moving forward. But it's just funny that the same person who was stopping all ICOs in 2017 is now the lead on the dollar project, pushing for the central bank digital currency through the Fed issuance, the Federal Reserve issuance. They were just stopping ICOs because they didn't want too much competition before they could unveil this Fed coin or whatever it is, central bank digital currency, because they didn't want to compete. See, this is
Right. When Bitcoin was at a run up and it got up to what 18 something 17 $18,000, they pulled the plug on it because I think at that point they knew pretty soon they'd be getting out of control. Now you telling me I didn't see a video. I wish I will. I didn't know that
I
it
thought
was
you did,
on
because
that.
when you said that, I was like, oh, that's what I talked about yesterday. Yeah, it's quirky. It's like the third time this has happened today.
I know. No, are they talking about you? Did I hear you say it's not going to be on the blockchain? It's not going to be a blockchain. So it's going to be
It's going
controlled
to
by
be a
them.
distributed ledger settled every 3 minutes. It's going to be DLT is the protocol that they're using. They're going to be choosing R3. And I've actually met a couple guys from R3 when I was over in Taiwan. And they're going to be using Ripple. Because unbeknownst to me, until I did a lot more research on Ripple the last few days, they have instant liquidity in there. And I'm like, oh, so the overnight repo market crashes. They can't get to liquidity. But then they're moving over to distributed ledger through Ripple and XRP and RippleNet that gives liquidity across the planet through a central bank and payment systems, providers, bank to bank, company to bank, and everything in between, credit cards as well as PayPal and Payoneer, all moving on the overnight, but they're getting instant liquidity as the planet's moving through those 8-hour durations. Isn't that so interesting as well?
So basically, this really is going to. They really are looking for a one world currency.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this will essentially end up being. It'll be controlled by the Fed. Now, have you?
Oh,
No, I'm
thanks for
saying.
making my day, James. You just made my day.
So let me ask this. So I understand that now it was in Yahoo News, if you can believe that, but it was reported in other places as well that the Treasury, the Fed's been sort of merged into the Treasury, or at least in the process of doing that. And Mnuchin is in control of the Fed right now because he's the Treasury Secretary. Do you see Trump moving to end the Fed? Is that something that you see possibly happening? And if Trump ends the Fed and basically goes back to a Treasury issued dollar, which is well within the Constitution to do you think this could destroy their one world currency plan, or do you think there's no stopping them at this point?
Not a chance. Even if mucus and the Fed were out of the way, everything else would just cave in on it. The ECB still there, Japanese central bank still there, IMF still there. I mean, there's a million other players that would fill the vacuum in a second. So just because one's gone, I mean, there's so many others that would take its place. And everybody talked about ending the Fed, and the Fed. Well, that's really not going to do anything. You need to end the Fed, the ECB, IMF, and also the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, and then maybe we can make some headway. But until they're all taken out, nah.
And we're not just talking, these aren't just, folks, we're talking trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars at stake here. And when I say
They moving through
trillions
the
and
system. So
trillions,
how much will Ripple be worth? If you got, let's say you said trillion, let's do 3 trillion a day moving through, and that's kind of a low number anyway. Let's make it 5 trillion. 5 trillion on settlements per day moving through the RippleNet system and R3. What do you think the price of XRP would go up to? It's not financial advice, but I'm always guessing it. Okay, we saw $3 at the height of 2017. It's currently around 20 cents, hovering between 20 and 30 cents. But if it started to be used for all the settlements, I mean, what do you think that it might value at?
a lot higher. I don't know. And we haven't even thrown gold or silver into the mix. I mean, you can't print that. You can't print gold and silver. So, I mean, I think it's going to have some role. Maybe it's just going to be in sovereign debt settlements, between nations. I don't know. That's what it's kind of like what it is now. Apparently, that's what I was understanding. Bitcoin, of course, what we were told, what the experts thought was that Litecoin was going to be like silver, going to be passed amongst the folks, and Bitcoin would eventually be settled debt between sovereign nations. Don't know if that's even going to happen. Don't know if they come out with their own digital currency, much like right now, they're not going to want any competition. They're not going to want any competition. Just like you can't go out and print David's dollar and you start distributing it around, because they'll come and kick your doors down, and they'll stop that pretty quickly because they don't want competition. So is it just going to only be XRP? I mean, will that be the only they certainly can't get rid of all these other Bitcoins or these other digital currencies. Can they?
No, I'd say you're right. You're talking about sovereign settlements or large sums between companies for the XRP distributed ledger. But, going down to that day-to-day instantaneous buy a pack of gum type of payment thing, I have been told, and doing a bunch of research, maybe Digibyte or Stellar Lumens at that point coming down, because it's that super fast and it can, that small value in it. And Litecoin, I don't know where it sits, but you ever get Stellar transferred, it's instantaneous basically. And so is Digibyte. So those two for sure. And I keep hearing them again and again. They keep cropping up in strange conversations. But yeah, to answer your question on what might be used in a daily settlement. And, I don't think everything's going to go away. I think it's going to require a full combination of A, B, C, D, E, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, R, Q, R, S, all the way down to reformulate an entire monetary system, including gold and silverback currencies, including maybe using land. Like the IMF always wants to talk about using natural resource coin, something like this, where they use a country's natural resources, whether it be forests, water, whatever, to have a value to base something on for type of cryptocurrency issuance. And then, with all the distributed ledger, and then we got the Bitcoin. And I think it's going to just take a whole resolve of a combination of, because to distribute it out, if you're going to the distributed way anyway, that's what they would want, is a distributed amount of economy. And, because look how many mediums you could use, and it's sort of distributed ish, but still seems to be controlled by a lot of puppet strings at the top. And especially that new IMF coin, please. IMF coin. Fed coin's bad enough, but IMF coin. See my eyes rolling in the back of my head here. Sheesh.
Well, David,
What do you think about that IMF coin?
Well, come on, man. I mean,
I see. Yeah, exactly.
IMF. Are you kidding me? I mean, they're really what these organizations really have been put in place to do is to be money launderers for the elite. It really is. I mean, look how many of these backroom deals are finding that went on behind the scenes, money passed all through the IMF and kicked back. And I mean, it's all a fraud, dude. It's all a scam. I mean, we're all the milk cows, sadly. But I mean, I think that's the good news is, I know from my own personal experience and from some people that I know and family that there are people that are reaching out that they never would suspect that would have ever taken a red pill and kind of becoming awake. And it's really a lot of that going on right now. And I think that a lot of people can see that a lot of scams have been pulled on us. Now, I don't know, if there's a whole lot that we can really do, except just, I always say that we just need to resist and say, we're not going to comply. We're not going to comply with what you say. But, it's much easier said than done.
I agree. As soon as we say it stops, it stops. And if you notice that, once people got agitated enough to start to have all these opening up things, did you notice how quickly it opened up?
Yeah.
Like it ended. First, they were like, it's iron fist, close it down. And then as soon as everybody said, no more, enough, now we're open again. Wow. Isn't it quirky how that worked? And it's been like that through history. Every time they say enough's enough, whether it be McCarthyism or everything in between, apartheid, and enough's enough, bye-bye, we're done with it. And then it slowly disappears into the woodwork, does it not?
Indeed.
But it's going to take a resolve here. That's the thing. We all have to say no to means, because I personally will not take that in my body. And I know many others who say the same thing, but they're going to try to require it to go back to work or to be able to enter food distribution areas or supermarkets. It's going to be part of the plan too, is you have to have that to be able to go into a supermarket to make sure you're not going to contaminate it, quote unquote, supermarket, get anybody sick in there, contaminate the meat or whatever it is. But wait, it's wrapped in cellophane. Like, how are you going to contaminate? Okay, it's in a can, like it's in a box already. How are you going to contaminate that? Anyway, that's part of the master plan. But if everybody says no, they can get at least a 10 to 20% no rate, then it just will fail, because it just won't work for enough people. There'll be, if you just opt, and I wish more people would opt going through the lines in the TSA as well, because if they clogged up the line like they did, remember there was a strike, they did it one, I think it was a Thanksgiving or another day, 3-day period, and it just broke down the system completely. We're like, all right, everybody go through, just whatever, just go through. If we did that every time, every day in the airports, instead of just being sheep going through, and if we do the same thing with these, mandatory, I don't want something in my body mandatory that you haven't tested for like 3 months. Geez, you don't know what's going to happen in 20 years, 10 years. Plus, I don't really trust what's going to be put in there. That's my own feeling, though. That's my personal opinion on that. Take it for what it's worth. But if enough people say no, it just won't go forward. Always been like that in history. Just say no.
Just say we're not going to do it anymore, and we're just, if everybody in mass says we're just not going to do it anymore, what are they going to do? Throw us all in jail? It's a mathematical impossibility. There's not enough of them. There just isn't. I didn't have a chance. I was going to ask earlier, David, but you held up your light. Tell us about Adapt 2030. Like I said, yeah, I think you've got over 100,000 subscribers now. Good for you. Oilseedcrops.org. What can people find when they go to your Adapt 2030 channel and oilseedcrops.org?
Well, thank you very much. And yes, thank you for everybody who's helped me come up to that 100,000 level, including yourself, for getting me on several interviews and all the kind words, and then people passing information back and forth. I didn't do it. Everybody else did it. I'm kind of just the guy who made the stuff and threw it out at the wind, and people found enough value in it, moving us forward, that solutions inside, and a nice way to discuss the problem, but also look for the solutions together, because we're all in it together. That 100,000 people decided that information was worthy enough that when he puts out something else, I want to see it again. And thank you for bringing me on the program a couple of times through the past here. And when we first started on, I remember way back in the day when you had the radio program with Kay Renee, and got me and my feet wet there. I was all scared the first few shows, and nail biting, all nervous. Like now my wings are open more. And if you go to oilseedcrops.org, what I do is I take those videos on Adapt 2030, and then I have a friend of mine help me, and we turn it into a PDF. So we load it as a post, and then inside there, it's created as a PDF with all the images and all the text and all the graphs. Now, the reason I spend the time to do that is because then you can share those with other people. And if they have the information at their fingertips, and they can actually see the graphs, and you can explain it, and then they can pass it to somebody else in a usable form. That's the way it is. It's about sharing information right now, because that's the only way it can be done. And if we want to see the change we want to make, we have to be the change. So if I'm spending the time in the day to go out and create graphs and PDFs so people can share it to try to pass the message to, that's what you're going to get there, as well as links to the channel and the podcast. But it's more about creating in a PDF, so then you can read through it, the post, and see if you like what the information is. And if you find a nugget in there, download the PDF free. It's all free. And just clip out what you like and then send it on to somebody else. So then I always leave everything high res too, because I appreciate high res graphics that you can really share as an information source. And then, if you're going through the site for a month or two and you find a bunch of nuggets, then you can, in turn, can create your own PDF of all the important stuff that you thought would make sense to and explain it in a different way. Because maybe I use too technical of words or whatever it is, but we're still all in it together, and it will be from this point forward. So hope it helps you explain to other people to get them on board. Because, like you said, James, there's a lot of people much more willing to listen to information today because so many strange things have happened. So this is just, I really believe it's all tied to the food. And if we can all understand that it's really all tied to the food, all these control mechanisms, then we can start to break away from that right away and get more self-sufficient, like you were talking about vertical agriculture, starting your own garden. How about neighbors come together and we use three yards and we have all the kids help and we have all the neighbors together in one huge giant backyard? Oh no, that's illegal in some states. Can't do it, James. Too much food. You got to get a license. Can't have that much. You got to store it. Oh, you need a FICO sanitary. You're going to store like 200 pounds of pumpkins. Oh, you need a license for that. Refrigeration's not okay. Did anybody come and inspect that? That's a $400 fee.
Isn't it ironic that we panic over? Isn't it ironic that we panic over toilet paper, which we that we can create our own food, right? We can create our own food, and we don't even take advantage of it, right? Well, we only got about a minute left, man. I wanted to talk about that.
Wrap it up
real quick. So to planting, get a good spot with good sun. Make sure you have good soil. Water it properly, and give it love and care, and keep the bugs off and the animals. And you should have some limited amount of some reasonable success. And then inside vertical growing, we only got about 30 seconds. I know you can't hit this. We didn't have time.
You hit it up, man. Finish it off. I'm really listening to what you're saying. Go with the vertical ag. What else?
Well, I mean, window boxes, you can grow that. You can grow herb like you talked about. You can grow these herbs right in your pretty small area, like in little pots inside your house. Get a closet inside your house, if nothing else. These LED lights like you have. There's always, no matter how small of a place you have, there's always a spot where you can grow something and have a little bit of dependence, because it's peace of mind too. David Devine, we're just out of time, my friend. Adapt 2030.
And your one plant is going to make the difference. So even just one plant, please plant it.
That's right. David Devine, sorry we're out of time, brother. Oilseedcrops.org.
Thanks for your time. Enjoy it.
Appreciate
See you
you.
next video.
Talk to you next time. All right, folks.
Bye.